Hey podcasters, are you tired of endlessly searching for the perfect guest for your show? Well, look no further. Podmatch is the ultimate platform for connecting podcast hosts with guests. Whether you're a seasoned podcaster looking for fresh voices or an expert wanting to share your knowledge, Podmatch has got you covered. It's kind of like a dating site for podcasts. With Podmatch's advanced algorithm, finding your perfect match is just a few clicks away. Simply create your profile, specify your interests, and let Podmatch do the rest. You'll be matched with guests or hosts who align with your interests in no time. To get started today, visit www.joinpodmatch.com/Quiet Connection Podcast and start making meaningful connections that will take your podcast to the next level. Welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. In this episode, Susan shares her journey of self-discovery and reinvention since becoming a parent. After going through postpartum anxiety and struggling to find herself as a mother, she understood the value of reconnecting with her own identity. This realization came to her when she discovered the power of fashion and personal styling. She now encourages her clients to celebrate their bodies and embrace the things in life that bring them joy. Let's hear from Susan. Hello. Today I'm here with Susan. Susan, how are you?
I'm doing so well, Chelsea. How are you?
I'm okay. I feel like that's my go-to answer, but okay is good.
Yeah.
Okay, it's good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that.
I'm really excited to have you on.
Thank you.
I have a whole list of things about you, but rather than me read the list, because that would be boring, I'd love it if you could tell me a little bit about yourself as well as who you were before becoming a parent.
Ooh. Who I was before I became a parent. Yeah. So that just, it fits so perfectly with my story and how I got here. So it's just going to share all of it.
Yes.
I started out as a middle school music teacher. I taught middle school band for 7 years before I became an intuitive personal stylist, which is the amazing career path that I am on now. And my journey kind of becoming an intuitive personal stylist really coincided with around the time that I became a parent. So I had been teaching and, I had always loved helping people to find clothes that really felt like themselves. It really made them feel excited about being seen truly as who they are. That was always like a passion of mine. From the time that I was old enough to go to the mall with my friends, that's what I loved doing. And it's something that I just kind of continued casually through my life, but I never thought becoming a personal stylist was a career path that I could pursue. So I pursued my other passion, which was music instead. And I was teaching for, several years. And then I took a year off when my son was born. And I knew that I wanted that time with him. I was lucky enough to be able to take that time. And at first I thought that I was going to kind of transition into becoming a stay-at-home mom because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My sister was a stay-at-home mom. So I had these amazing influences in my life of stay-at-home moms. And I remember being a child of one and what that was like and how special that was. And after dealing with a lot of postpartum anxiety, having, just a really difficult time being at home full-time with my son, I realized that while I loved him tremendously, I loved being a mom, that I needed to do something different. And I couldn't be a stay-at-home mom. And I also knew that I didn't want to go back to teaching. But around that time, during that year that I took off from work, my husband also was let go from his job. So, which is just, it was a delightful time in my life.
Yeah. Sarcasm. Heavy sarcasm.
Heavy sarcasm. Major sarcasm.
Yes.
For sure. I like to refer to it as like my tower card moment for anyone who's familiar with the tarot. And, tower card typically reflects a time in your life where everything is like crumbling down, to then be rebuilt and rebuilt better. But you kind of have to go through these really difficult times where everything is just brought down to the foundation in order to be able to rebuild. So that was definitely my tower card moment. So I went back to teaching because I had to. And I said, I was like, well, why don't I just give it a shot? Why don't I just see how it goes? And maybe I'll feel differently once I'm there. And I realized that just in that time that I had taken off from teaching and becoming a mom, becoming a parent for the first time, and all of these like major transitional moments happening in my life, I felt so disconnected from myself, from my job, from just about everything. Because I knew that a lot was going to change, becoming a parent. And I feel that's really silly to say. Like, I knew that things are going to change, but like, I really didn't know. Because you don't until you go through it. And in addition to just having all of these different thoughts about, okay, well, this doesn't feel aligned. This doesn't feel like me anymore. Even like the clothes that I used to wear don't feel like me anymore. Having all of these conflicting energies surrounding me, really, like with my life, I felt at a loss completely. I felt like I didn't know what I wanted. I felt like I didn't know who I was. And I went back to teaching, and I eventually had this major light bulb moment when I was talking to a friend of mine, because I knew I had to get out of teaching, but I wasn't really talking about it because, my husband just lost his job, and people don't really like to hear when you're like, what, that stable, reliable paycheck that I have, like, I'm gonna get on out of there because for mental health reasons. People look at you like you're like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Especially when you tell them that you want to leave that stable paycheck in order to start your own business. They really look at you sideways like, what? But I knew after having this light bulb moment, I talked to a friend of mine. She said, I like what you pick out for me more than what I get in like my monthly subscription box. And that was my moment where I was like, oh my gosh, like I could do this. At first she suggested that I work for one of the subscription services, and I was like, absolutely not. If I'm leaving teaching, it is to do something to work for myself. Like, I am not having another boss again in that way, in, public education, corporate kind of same vibes. But that was my moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this feels good. And this could actually work for me. So that's when I started figuring out how one becomes a personal stylist, what that looks like. And really, that's when I finally started to come back to myself, because I was asking myself questions that only I could answer. Because when I was seeking other people's opinions or guidance, and, they were like, you're doing what? You'll be great at it, but like, why don't you do it as a side hustle for a while? Stay with teaching where you have benefits and a pension and all of those things. And what was funny to me, and I think what really helped me to be able to leave teaching and start my own business full time was the fact that my husband was also a teacher. And when he lost his job, it was sudden. We were not expecting it. Yeah. And so whenever anyone who was coming from a good place, of course, I don't mean to sound critical, by the people who had my best interest at heart, with their concerns. But I was coming from it from a place of, oh, you mean that same stability that has now left us with only one major income? That doesn't work for me. That's not true in my life, my firsthand experience. So I appreciate the concern, but I need to do what's right for me. And between having all of the postpartum anxiety, which, my son is going to be 10 in October. And I remember when he was born, having all of those check-ins with the different doctors, postpartum, there was a lot of talk around postpartum depression, but not a lot of talk about postpartum anxiety. And that has thankfully changed tremendously in the last 10 years. But I remember filling out the checklists and everything, the wellness questionnaires and all of that, and saying, well, no, like none of this is how I'm feeling, but I know that what I'm feeling isn't right either. And I know that I'm not okay. But it took me probably a solid year for things to continue to get bad and be bad, where I was having almost daily panic attacks, that I was, again, talking to a friend, thankfully, who just gave me the permission that I think I was seeking at the time to not only seek out therapy, but also seek out medication, which is, in my situation, was really like what my body, what my brain needed to just kind of get me a little bit more leveled out, rather than completely, constantly being in this fight or flight. And that was incredibly life-changing. I wish that I had that sooner. And I'm grateful for, parents now that that's not the situation for them, that it's not as limited in terms of the information that's out there. Because I think that becoming a parent, you can lose yourself so easily. And when you don't have any kind of tools to kind of bring yourself back to you, you just are living in this state of limbo, and where you don't even have yourself as an anchor. That's so hard and sad. And, while you're going through all of these other things that go along with being a new parent, in addition to keeping a tiny human alive, like,
right? Oh, yeah, and there's that.
Oh, right. Like, it's all about me. Again, sarcasm. You're keeping a tiny human alive, and you're trying to, just exist as this completely new version of you, while still trying to honor who you used to be. And I think that was also part of my struggle. But thankfully, that major career change was something that really helped to facilitate me in returning to myself, because that's so much of the work that I do with my clients, because I was able to go through it myself. And I knew that even when I was becoming a personal stylist initially, I knew that it was more than just about clothes. It always has been more than just about the clothes. It's about that deeper connection to who you are, and using clothes as this beautiful outward expression of that. And when you go through something as major as becoming a new parent, and your identity changes, your body changes, I have clear memories of myself, like standing in my closet, getting ready to go back to work, and looking at my clothes and just thinking to myself, like, wait, but how does the person that I am now work with the person that I was? And seeing my clothes as that reflection of my past, and seeing so much of it not able to support the person that I am now. And that applies for so many other stages of life, not just becoming a new parent. It can apply to so many things, surviving a global pandemic, just going through a major medical event within your life, or having a change in relationships. There are so many big transitional moments that can occur within us that can leave us in that same place of where I was, standing in my closet being like, what do I do with this? This isn't me anymore. And who am I now? And having to answer that question of who am I now? That is a heavy one. That is a heavy question to answer, especially if you haven't asked yourself that in a minute, because it can be real easy to just jump into those roles and say, like, oh, well, I'm a mom, I'm a personal stylist, and list all of the things, off of your resume. But what really is the important part about it, and what's the difficult part, is when you go deeper, like, okay, but who is Susan without all of those roles? And that's where the discomfort comes in for a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. You just condensed like 10 years into 10 minutes. Holy mackerel. So some things that stuck out to me. Well, one, our kids are very similar in age. My daughter's going to be 9 in October.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, so I mean, I'm commiserating with you that this is a very tricky life stage to be in as a parent. I'm learning that I thought the teens were going to be hard, but apparently 9 and 10 is difficult. But aside from that, some things that stuck out to me were, especially you talking about postpartum anxiety and how it, even just 10 years ago, that's not a long time ago.
It's really not.
It's really not. And that I didn't know about postpartum anxiety either.
No.
I knew about postpartum depression.
Yep.
And I think I only knew about it because my doctor had told me to look out for it, because I was predispositioned. So when I was diagnosed with my first, I don't know if it was the same for you, but I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. And that's absolutely not what it was.
Right.
That definitely resonated with me. And you're right, it is being talked about more now, which is so nice. But the biggest thread throughout that whole thing is that loss of identity. And that's a phrase and a feeling that I hear from so many people that I talk to, because as you said, like, you're a completely different person. You didn't just birth a human. You birthed a new version of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I guess, when that sort of sunk in for you, like what in those, it's all a blur, I'm sure, as those first few postpartum days are, but when did it kind of sink in for you? Like, I'm kind of on an island here. Like, I don't know who I am or where I am.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think back and remember that specifically. I mean, I definitely remember it coming back again when I was going back to work, but I know it happened way before then, where I think the first several months of being a new parent are just a big old blur, big old sleep blur. But I think once you start to kind of come out of that a little bit, in like that 4 to 6 months stage, I think that's really like when, for me at least, like when I had those moments where I could just sit and exist, and I was at home with my son and just thinking like, okay, like this is my life now, and that's beautiful, but also what is happening?
Yeah.
How did I get here? Which is so, like, I feel so ridiculous even saying that, but I think that's something that, is really often a thought that a lot of us have after becoming new parents. We go from like pregnancy to then delivery, and then it's a big old blur for a few months, and then you wake up and you have this baby that you created and this new version of yourself, and you're like, how did all of these pieces come together to be able to get me here? And what do I do from here? As this tiny human becomes, eventually like less and less reliant on me, then what do I do with myself? Because that's usually when a lot of my new clients come to me who are new parents. It's not really in that first year, because you're just constantly, like, there's just so much that is in demand of you. It's when the dust kind of settles and you catch your breath. And, maybe your kiddo starts going to daycare, or you have more childcare, or you go back to work, or whatever it is, or even they're just able to walk around and you don't need to be, holding their hands and holding your breath the entire time. It's that sense of, what does my life look like now? And what do I do with my life now? Because I don't just go back to how things were when, before I became a parent. I have to completely shift the way that I live my life. And so much of the way that I have lived my life is shifted anyway. And you're just looking at yourself in the mirror, almost like unable to recognize yourself. And it's when you do take the time to come back to yourself and make time for yourself, which I know is a very privileged statement to make, But even if it's just a moment to look at yourself and say, okay, like, I'm here for you. What do you need from me? And where do we go from here?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just this incredible sense of like, you have to have that sense of support for yourself in order to be able to just move forward.
I want to highlight what you just said, because that is so deeply impactful. And it's something that I'm learning now. And I've got 2 kids, and I'm in my journey, but to look at yourself in the mirror and speak to yourself and ask of yourself, what do you need? That is so impactful, and it's something we don't do.
No.
We're sort of trained as a society, and especially people who identify as female, to just pick up and carry on.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is important to stop and take that, even like you said, even if it's 5 minutes. Okay, I'm here, I'm listening. What do you need from me?
Yeah.
That's huge.
It really is, because I think often, especially as parents or caretakers in general, we're so used to putting the emphasis on other people, making the priority other people. And it can be easier. Like, I'm not saying that the job itself is easy by any means. I'm saying it can be easier to put the focus on someone else rather than looking at yourself, especially when you're in this state of unknown.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot with my clients and with, just a lot of people in general, where they don't even take the time to really look at themselves in the mirror, unless it's, okay, well, I'm looking at myself in the mirror when I'm doing my makeup, but you're not really looking at yourself. You're completing a task. Mm-hmm. Or I make sure that my outfit looks okay before I leave the house. Okay, again, that's a task, but you're not looking at yourself. And to take just a couple minutes where you make eye contact with yourself, with your reflection, and you try not to pick yourself apart, because that can be an easy default for a lot of us. Yes. You just look at yourself with this, just no judgment, and instead just try to show that support for yourself, like showing that support for you and holding space for you. Even if you start with just like a few seconds, and then the next day it's like a little bit more and a little bit more. It doesn't have to be this, epically long connection, but it makes a difference. And you start to see yourself differently. You start to show up for yourself differently. And that translates into so many other aspects of your life. And I think that one way that it can be a little bit easier to do that, especially as a parent, is when we think about our kids and we think about how we want our kids to view themselves and what kind of relationship we want them to have with their own identity. Because, we're constantly trying to foster that and nurture that. It's like, be you without any kind of shame or judgment, like, please. And imagine just saying that to yourself.
Right?
Like, can you imagine, like, how healing and probably a little sad it would feel the first time you say that?
Yeah.
Because you probably haven't thought that way since you were a kid, because people stop telling you that. Instead, you're inundated with all of the shoulds, what you should do, how you should look, how you should show up, what's expected from you. And we just kind of get into this default where we're like nodding along. We're like, yes, that's what I should do. This is how a mom should look. This is how a mom should sound like, all of these things. But then when we take that time to just be there for ourselves, we start to take that step back and be like, okay, but who's telling me this?
Yeah.
Because I'm not telling me this. And what would it feel like if I asked myself what I really wanted and how I felt like I wanted to show up as a mom, or just as Susan, as myself. And when we start taking that time too, it just allows us to make choices, even with our clothing, coming back to personal style, with our clothing, with our hair, with our makeup, with, even our nails, things that might light us up in ways that we kind of put on the back burner or, put away for a long time because it's something that, we liked when we were younger and now it's no longer appropriate. Well, fuck that. Like, yeah, who says? Like, appropriate is such bullshit anyway when it comes to how people should show up, how adults should show up. But I think that taking the time to just connect with yourself and unlearn a lot of those shoulds, it's transformational, truly.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I've can't remember the last time I said this, but one of my favorite sayings or phrases that I learned in DBT is don't should all over yourself.
Yes.
Yes. And I had another mom explain it as the should storm. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I just love I love a good euphemism anyway, but but in reality, yes, we're constantly bombarded with shoulds as parents and how we should be showing up and how we should be doing this and how we should be doing that. And you're right, it is bullshit.
Yeah.
And well, it is. And another thing that I hear a lot is like, I don't have time for self-care, or I don't have time for, well, self-care can look like a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
And exactly like what you just said, self-care can mean literally 30 seconds of looking in the mirror and just, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? What's up, me?
Exactly.
Like replacing the voice in your head with your own voice.
Yes. There's a book that I read a couple years ago by Mel Robbins called The High Five Habit. And I remember first hearing about it, I was like, this sounds kind of silly. Like, I love Mel Robbins. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it a listen. And one of the ideas behind it is just literally like high-fiving your own reflection, which again, sounds silly. But it's and it doesn't have to be aggressive. She says, she describes the whole like technique behind it. But it's all really like the main idea behind it is exactly what we're talking about, where it's that having that connection with yourself and showing up for yourself. So I'm not, this is not like a difficult thing to do. It can be something as simple as like literally just making eye contact, being like, touching the mirror with your hand. And that can be maybe like how you start. If looking at your own reflection and saying, I'm here for you feels like it's too much, because for some people it is, especially if you've been unable to have that kind of connection for a long time. Yeah. Maybe something as simple as just looking at yourself, giving yourself a high five feels a little bit better. Even if it's silly, like laugh at yourself. Okay. Like who else is going to be there? Like do it, wherever. It doesn't have to be anywhere special. It's not like, you have to go to a public place and do it. It can be in your bathroom,
I don't know why, but that just gave me did you watch The Office? Were you an Office fan? Okay. That just gave me the image of Michael Scott, like standing in the middle of the office going, I declare bankruptcy. Like you don't have to go into the middle of where the mall and be like, I love myself.
Right. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. So for you, that journey was an interesting one, because you were at a crossroads in a lot of areas.
Oh, yes.
In a lot of areas. You were in a crossroads in your career. You were in a crossroads in rediscovering yourself. Your partner had lost his job. And so, there was a lot of self-discovery going on there.
So much.
I'm going to go ahead and assume that it wasn't like a light switch overnight, like going from I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm having a hard time figuring out who I am as a mom, to I'm gonna start a business of my own. So where did that, we've been talking a lot about supporting yourself and showing up for yourself. Where did that transition take place for you, and how did it take place? What sort of was it you pulling yourself up, or did you have a support system that sort of helped you be like, all right, this is how we're going to navigate this?
Yeah. So it's interesting because what was difficult for me is the people who I was closest to were the people that were expressing the most concern for me, which I think is, looking back on it, talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, that is very, very common. But when you're in it, it feels hard. It feels like almost like you're being let down, because you're like, oh my gosh, I have this great idea. This is what I'm going to do. I feel so aligned, like all the excitement that's just bursting from you. And then you share it with the people closest to you, and their love can show up as fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely understand that now. But I think whenever we're sharing really positive experiences or something we're excited about, it always feels so much better when the person you're talking to matches that energy, right? Where you're like, I'm going to start a business. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Feels way better than I'm going to start a business. Are you sure about that? Because here are like all the things that could go wrong. There's a difference. Clearly. Thankfully, I was able to connect with other people. I started doing online courses, and I sought out mentors who were personal stylists who were already established. And I did that very, very early on in the process of starting my business, because I knew I needed support from the right people, support from people who had already done this, rather than people who had no experience in the journey that I was about to begin, Yeah. And that can be really challenging to navigate, because, obviously not every mentor is going to be the right one, but thankfully I had amazing experiences, for the most part. And they were able to really give me the tools that I was seeking and the resources that I needed to just, put my head down and put all of my energy into growing my business. Like every time I had some kind of frustrating moment that happened when I was teaching, or I had a bad day, I like to say that I was transmuting that energy into growing my business. So if I had a frustrating interaction with my principal, which happened a lot because,
I know that story. Yes.
Because principals.
Yes.
I, instead of just sitting with that and being unhappy with the fact that I was still teaching and I wasn't a stylist just yet, I would immediately do something to help grow my business, whether it was, writing down some ideas for content creation because I was establishing a website and a blog presence at the time, or doing something to expand on my marketing, or, all of those things that you need to do constantly as a business owner, but especially early on. I just took that energy and I was like, you know what? I'm not sitting in this. I'm going to use this as momentum to keep me going in the direction that I want to end up in. So that was tremendously helpful. And I made some connections with other people in my area too, who were either, entrepreneurs of like different avenues, like different stages. So we could all kind of bounce ideas off of each other, attending different events, like for networking purposes and all of that too. So I really made an effort early on to seek out community because I knew that it was such an important element of support that I needed. And in order to, help me through those really tough days or those tough moments or the frustrations that, while my partner is an incredible person and is able to listen and hold space for me, he, at the time, couldn't fully understand. And same with some of my closest friends. Some of my closest friends at the time were also teachers. Yeah. And they're still teachers, some of them. So, now I'm 8 years into being a personal stylist, and looking back at the person I was, I know obviously we all change over the course of 8 to 10 years. Right? Like that's normal part of just being a human. But looking back at the person I was and how I made choices in my life and how I navigated what I wanted out of life then versus now, the person that I was then is almost unrecognizable to me in the best way. And so much of that comes from just showing up for myself and having the right kind of support around me to be able to do that. So when I do have those moments where I feel like I can't show up for myself because, we're having a low day, mental health is real.
Yeah.
I know that I can reach out to some of my closest friends who are also business owners and be like, hey, I'm in a funk. And some of it is for legitimate reasons, some of it's not. Like, can you just hear me?
It's all legitimate. It's all valid. It's all valid.
I appreciate that. But yeah, so it's a long way of saying I found my community.
Well, no, but that's beautiful. And you built that community. And what that illustrates too is that we talk a lot on this podcast about how much community is needed in the motherhood realm. But community is just needed in life. We're not meant to do life alone.
No.
So you really did. You built up a community around yourself. How did that sort of translate as you're going through this like personal growth and personal development? How did that translate into how you viewed yourself in this role of mom?
So that was probably one of the tougher areas, because a lot of the community that I sought out at the time, while they were business owners and they were able to kind of hold space for me there, most of them were not parents. So then I had to be even more aware of the kind of community and support that I needed in other parents and other moms who are business owners, because that's like another facet of things. And that's something that I haven't been frustrated about this in a minute, because I've sought out different community now that I know that I need. But I remember early on getting a little frustrated with some of the typical coaching tips on, how to grow your business and what your average day should look like and all of that nonsense. Well, not nonsense. Sorry. Take that back. Felt like nonsense to me because I was bitter because I couldn't do it.
I feel that.
So that's a me thing. That's not a them thing. Being a little cranky because I'm like, well, but how does all of that look when you also have a tiny human that you're caring for? Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
So then it became, okay, well, I found my community of business owners. Now I need to find my community of moms or parents who are also business owners, because that is that other level. And what also became really important to me too, and what's still very important, is sharing so much of the work that I do with my son so that he can see what it's like to have a mom who is a business owner, who, what the work is that I do and why it's important. So he can just, and he's so sweet and how proud he is of me. Like, it just lights me up. I mean, there's nothing better than when your kid is genuinely, like, not bragging about you, but speaking highly of you. Like, well, yeah, makes my heart burst in the best ways.
Yeah. Well, it means that you guys are connecting. Like you said, you're sharing something that is deeply important to you, and I don't want to say defines you, but is a huge piece of you. You're sharing that openly with him, and yeah, that's beautiful. He's proud of you. You're his mom, and he's proud of you.
Thank you.
I love that. I say that's like one of my, I think it's like a catchphrase now. I love that. I need to come up with something better, because every episode I'm like, oh, I love that.
I'm the same way, if it makes you feel any better.
Oh my gosh. Well, but I genuinely mean it is the thing.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd love to know a little bit about like the clients that you see, because you've hinted a lot towards, you do see like parents who are coming out of the once you're postpartum, you're always postpartum, but we're sort of coming out of the baby bubble. What are some commonalities you're seeing in the clients that you work with, and how do you use your skills to help them really hone in on finding themselves again?
Yeah. So a lot of my clients, I said the majority of my clients, they are all at this point in their lives where they've been through a big life transition, and like we were talking earlier, that can look like a lot of things. Sometimes it's a change in jobs or a change in relationship, or coming out of the post-baby.
Yeah.
And then they are taking that time to kind of re-examine who they are. Like, they're ready for that. They're not in the phase where they don't want to look at themselves in the mirror. They're like ignoring themselves. They're like, okay, I see myself, but I don't really know who she is, or I'm starting to figure out who she is, but I don't know what this body is, like, because, there's a lot of changes that have happened there. So what do we do with all of that? And so they have some kind of just disconnect from themselves, but they're ready to reconnect. And they're ready to say, all right, I want to show up differently than I have before. Sometimes I hear, that like, oh, well, I used to love shopping because I was a smaller size when I was younger and all of those things. And now I just don't know how to dress my body. And so a lot of the work that I do, in addition to helping people find clothes that make them feel like their most excited version of themselves, is I help people to be able to celebrate their bodies and how they are right now. Because that's something else that I think we all hear a lot, or sometimes we might say it to ourselves where it's like, oh, well, when I lose 5 more pounds, when I lose 10 more pounds, I'm going to celebrate by going shopping.
Yep.
Which is, it breaks my heart to hear that. And I hear it so often. I've had to kind of protect my poor little stylist heart so that it doesn't get broken all the time. But really, it's so sad because we constantly feel like we have to make ourselves smaller in order to be worthy. And obviously that comes from the patriarchy.
Oh, yeah.
Done and done. But it's not so easy to just say that, accept it, and then change, right? So what I like to do when I'm working with my clients is helping them to find clothes that feel like a reflection of themselves, but also help them to celebrate their bodies for how they are right now, and try to unlearn that idea of, smaller is better, or they have to lose weight in order to be worthy, all of those things, or that they have to bounce back, right? I mean, how often do we hear that kind of terminology when it comes to being a new parent?
Bounce back culture.
Right. Like, I'm back to my pre-baby weight or my pre-baby size because I bounced back so fast. It's like, okay, but sure, that happens for people.
For some people. And that's cool if that's your journey. If that's something that is important to you.
Right.
Okay. But it doesn't have to be.
Exactly. And I think that that's where it gets lost, right? Because I think we hear those stories. We hear all about bouncing back. it's thankfully less so all over the magazines, just like a smidge less.
Just a tiny bit.
A tiny bit, not like a substantial amount. Don't get me wrong. But we miss the part that it's like, okay, but it's also totally fine if you don't. And if your body changed from having a baby, like you birthed a human.
You grew an entire human.
Like, why should your body go back to what it was? Like, it's completely just, it's an unrealistic idea. Again, it happens. If that's your journey, amazing. But we shouldn't expect it to be the norm. And so many people that I work with, that I speak to, carry that with them as this goal that they should achieve. And if they don't, they feel like they fail. And they carry that failure. And that is so heartbreaking because your body is expected to change. Like you as a human, as with your own personality, like we were talking about before, you are going to change. So why not give your body that same permission? And then just honor it as it changes rather than holding on to these, ridiculous goals or expectations of yourself. If you want to make changes in your lifestyle, fine, but don't use it as a punishment for yourself. Don't hold on.
That's the distinction.
Exactly.
Right there. That it should not be a punishment.
No. We shouldn't be punishing ourselves in, how we exercise, how we eat to achieve some arbitrary nonsense of a goal. when you can, of course, like, again, you can change your lifestyle, you can change those things, and then just continue to embrace how your body evolves along with it. And if there's still softness in there, like, that's beautiful. And you can find clothes that feel good on you and that just honor your body's journey, your personality's journey, your life's journey.
Yeah.
And show up with that authenticity in a way that feels really good.
Yeah. So again, I said, this is absolutely not about me. This is your story and your time. But
okay.
Well, but what ends up happening with 99.9% of these sessions when I'm meeting with my guests is that the universe seems to send me people when I need them. It's very interesting to me. So again, reiterating, this is not my story. This is your story and this is your time. But what you are talking about resonates with me so deeply. And I think a lot of people, postpartum or not, can relate to this. But so for me, it wasn't necessarily bounce back after baby. With everything that I went through and I'm going through with my mental health and medications and my pituitary tumor, my whole body inflated. Like I gained over 100 pounds in less than a year, unexplained. And I, just like we were talking about, punished myself for it and did not feel worthy and I felt like I needed to make myself small to be taken seriously. And I couldn't find clothes that made me feel like me. And I looked in the mirror and I didn't see me. And hearing you talk about all of these things not only validates those thoughts, but it gives me sort of permission to be like, that person was going through something and it wasn't my body's fault.
No.
And I didn't need to punish it and I didn't need to punish myself. So it's crazy because I think this wasn't even our first recording date. I think we had to reschedule this.
We did, yeah.
Yes. And so speaking with you now and hearing what you went through in your journey and what you're going through with your clients is resonating with me in a way that I didn't expect at all. And I thank you. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I think this is the deepest I've gone off the tracks in a very long time. But it's because, I think hearing you speak has sort of given me, I'm replacing that voice in my head in this moment, at least. In this moment, I hope I can hold on to it. But the voice in my head that said, like, I can't find clothes that fit me, and I don't feel like me, and I don't know how to dress myself, and whatever. Like, you can say everything that you want about clothes and style and fashion and beauty and all of the standards. There's a difference between, I'd love to get your opinion on this. Yeah. I feel like there's a difference between fashion for fashion's sake and seeing yourself, simply seeing yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you give your clients.
Absolutely. I mean, you completely nailed it. And I love that.
I mean, I'm sorry that I took up so much time rambling, but
no, that was beautiful. I loved everything that you shared. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so again, just meeting you today and from just the limited amount of back and forth chat that we've had just through social media and email and whatnot, like I feel that that's what you give your clients. You let them see themselves. And that's something that you did for yourself as well.
Absolutely. And it's something that I find that I continue to challenge myself with this task regularly. And it's because it's something that I'm constantly doing with my clients. And there were times where my relationship with my body fluctuated and changed. I just going off on a quick little side tangent about myself.
Go for it.
My relationship with my body. When my son was like 2.5 or 3 years old, I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis. I had a cyst that had ruptured on my ovary and sent me to the emergency room. And thankfully, because the cyst was still there, they were able to identify it as a complex cyst. I was able to get that diagnosis immediately. But, I am certain that I have had endometriosis my entire reproductive life.
Yeah.
But undiagnosed, gaslit for years. That's a conversation for another time. But
that's another podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. However, when I finally had my diagnosis and was dealing with the increased level of pain from the cysts and dealing with different medications and everything, and really the increase in symptoms that I was struggling with too, I was in chronic pain for years. And being on different medications as forms of like temporary treatments, and that really changed my body tremendously. Also dealing with multiple surgeries that then made me completely unable to just move in ways that I had enjoyed previously too. And then ultimately, for me, the way that my endometriosis journey subsided or ended, however you want to look at it, is just this last year. So November of 2023, I received a hysterectomy because my symptoms came back, and that was always part of my long-term medical plan. And for the first time in, I don't even know how long, when I finally recovered from the surgery, I was living my life without pain. And that was incredibly transformative. But those years of being in pain, still having to show up for my clients, still having to show up for my son, with how my symptoms would fluctuate and everything, I had to have a completely different relationship with myself and my body than I had ever had previously. Because not only was I dealing with, all of the bloating and the pain and the fluctuations in weight and all of that, but my energy levels, like everything, all just coming at me, and still having to show up and hold space for clients.
Yeah.
And there is no way that I would have been able to hold space for my clients and do the work that I do if I wasn't doing that same work for myself. And that's why it's something I constantly come back to. And I'm always checking in with myself and, what I really want, what I really like, what still feels good for me in terms of how I'm showing up and the work that I do and everything. And it's not an easy thing to do. Some days it's easier than others. Sometimes it's like, you know what? I want to wear that dress today. Done. Like it's that simple. And other times it's really not. And that gives me also a deeper understanding and I think ability to connect with my clients in a way that's not just about fashion. It's not just about, okay, we're going to get you a new wardrobe and ta-da, here's your makeover. Like, no.
Right.
It's so not just that. Like the work that I do is so much more than just clothes. And it's deeper, we're able to connect on an intuitive level, on an energetic level, on an emotional level, where it becomes this incredible inner journey that my clients experience that has a transformational element that then radiates outwardly, where they become able to give themselves permission to just have their own opinions about what they love, which sounds so silly. It sounds so small, I think, for a lot of us. But when you think about it, especially from the headspace of being a parent, sitting with your own opinions and being comfortable with it can be a little tough sometimes. We're constantly second guessing ourselves, whether it's like sleep training, what foods they should be eating, what sports they should be involved in, like all of those things, just coming at you at once. And when you can just say, you know what? Today I'm going to wear the blue dress today because I love that dress and that's exactly what I want to wear today. just having that be a complete thought, that's so powerful. It really is.
It is. So these are my favorite types of episodes because like my little list of like talking points, I didn't touch on any of them. and I love that though. I said it again. And I love that.
I love that for us.
I love that for us. Because this is a perspective that I didn't necessarily go into this thinking, oh yeah, this is what this is going to feel like. Which is why I don't do a lot of digging on my guests beforehand, because I want to meet you and understand you in the moment. I've so much of what you said has resonated with me. I know it's going to resonate with other people, and because this feels like a full circle moment, this is probably oversimplifying, but I think so. I always wait till the end to pick my wrap-up question.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the one I'm going to ask you, but it just feels so simple. But
okay.
It's okay. I think you're probably just going to say something beautiful again, like you are, like you have the whole time. But your message has been super clear throughout this. What has been healing for you has translated into how you are helping others heal. And I kind of want you to think about your entire journey from pre-mom to business owner to all of the above. Wrapping that whole experience up, what is the one thing you hope people take away from your journey?
The one thing that I really want to be the biggest takeaway from my own journey is for people to not be afraid to give themselves permission to follow what brings them joy. And that can be something like completely changing your career. It can be something as simple as just, you see something on a clothing rack that you get excited about and you buy it.
Yeah.
And it can be anything in between. But allowing yourself to just give that permission, I think that's really, that's been my biggest lesson. And trusting that voice,
Yeah. That's beautiful. And that's absolutely what I've gotten out of hearing you share your journey is hear your voice and trust your voice. Replace that voice in your head. It's not easy. Listen to me saying, just replace that voice in your head. Take that bullshit out and put something new. No, it's not that easy. But, give yourself that permission to follow your joy. I love it.
Because when we do a little bit at a time, like you said, changing that voice does not happen overnight. But making the choice to start changing, that's when the big change happens. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Susan, where can my listeners find you and the incredible work that you're doing?
Oh, thank you. So my website has an incredible amount of free resources, as well as, the different ways that you can work with me. I have a very active blog on there. And then Instagram is my social media platform of choice.
Yes.
It is me that controls it completely. So I always love hearing from listeners. If you found me through this podcast, just sending me a message. It will be me responding.
Yes.
You will talk to me, and I'm happy to either answer any questions that came up for you during this time, or just, say thank you for reaching out and for, whatever the big takeaway was for you while you're listening.
Yeah. All of those links will be in the show notes.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, so that they can find you. And I want to thank you for coming on, for being patient with me with all the rescheduling, and thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you, Chelsea. It's such a pleasure, truly.
Susan, thank you again for sharing your journey with me and for the work you do to help others rediscover their true selves. Sometimes these conversations come into my life exactly when they need to, and you absolutely sparked something in me. I hope my listeners are able to feel a little bit of that spark as well. You can keep up with us on Quiet Connection by following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Quiet Connection Podcast. You can help our community grow by leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider sharing our episodes on social media. To share your personal journey, you can contact us through our website at quietconnectionpodcast.com or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.